Hello. Today's motivational coffee talk is from Yvonne. She is a transformational life coach who specializes in empowering women and men to tap into their intuition, strengthen their internal belief system, get out of their own way, and create a life they actually get excited about. As a single mom that has recently been diagnosed with PTSD, generalized anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder, and major depression disorder, she will share a bit of the lessons she has learned on this learning journey with her children. She is here to give us the tea on unschooling and so much more. Please welcome Yvonne Dennis. Hello, Yvonne.
Hi, Khadija. How are
Oh,
you?
I'm so good. So I'm really happy that you are one of our speakers kicking off our teaching because you have so much to share regarding not only as a mom, as a single mother, and as a homeschooling mother, but this practice that we hear so many people talking about, this thing called unschooling. So before you give us the tea on what unschooling is, excuse me, I keep messing that up, on what unschooling is, I want you to first start by sharing with us what led to your decision to homeschool and ultimately choose unschooling as your homeschool practice.
Okay. Well, what led me to unschooling was realizing that I had birthed two young ladies who were anything but cookie cutter. So, being a single mom with a 7 year gap between my two children, there was only so much time in a day. And I discovered that unschooling would make choosing the lifestyle a logical choice because our day opened up and it gave us time to highlight each of their unique skills and talents without being bound up to a regular school schedule. So that's what led me to. I'd already been researching homeschooling for about 7 years when I came across the topic of unschooling. And once I started studying the principles, that's when I realized that it really seemed like a natural fit for us. Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So that leads us to the big question then. What is unschooling?
Okay, so when it comes to that question, you can get a lot of different answers. What I have been learning over the last 10 years, going on 11 years, is that a lot of people have a lot of different understandings and definitions about what unschooling is, what it means to them, what they've created it to mean in their lives. So, I'm going to talk to you about what it has looked like for us. So, for us, initially, when I first discovered unschooling, it was about leading an interest led learning style with my children, recognizing that that's already how I had been living. And it made perfect sense to me to live like that. And it made perfect sense to me to um, essentially give my children the space to be able to follow their interests. So the process has been evolving since we got started all those many years ago. And like I said, even though we started out by just getting into it more so from an educational standpoint, if you will, eventually our unschooling addressed our relationships with each other, and we discovered that we were benefiting more from partnership parenting versus authoritarian parenting. So unschooling started spreading out from just activities and topics and hobbies and what they were interested in doing to more so how we were living our lives in general. There were a few principles that when I was doing my research initially into unschooling that really stood out to me, and I feel give great examples of basics of unschooling. And so I'm going to share those with you all. So, one principle is that children are intelligent, and are consistently learning from when they're in utero. Another principle is that children are born with intuition intact and deserve being encouraged to trust their intuition from birth by we as parents trusting their intuition. And in turn, they're empowered to trust their own from birth, not needing to earn it. Another principle is that children have rights and that they deserve to be afforded those rights and for those rights to be respected as any other aged human does. Unfortunately, in this world, we seem to be prone to treat children like second-class citizens. And this is not right. It's not fair to them. Another principle that has stood out to me, and that stood out to me initially when I first started researching unschooling, is that children are autonomous beings, just like humans, adult humans, and they deserve to have their autonomy protected and respected. Another principle that has stood out to me is that it's very important to prioritize observing our children regularly, staying in close contact and communication with them to determine their evolving interests and learning styles versus allowing society and or others to dictate what our children should know or be taught, or anything like that. As far as myths that are often heard or parroted as far as unschooling is concerned, a major myth that I hear often and have heard over the years is that unschooling involves lazy parenting. It involves being neglectful, and it is the furthest thing from the truth, because actually, in order to really know what our children are interested in and how those interests are evolving from one day to the next, from one moment to the next, we need to be right up close and personal with our children. And it's a privilege to be able to do so. And checking in with them regularly and seeing what it is that lights their eyes up and their lives up from one day to the next, and then figuring out how to support that, how to give them space to support that for themselves and research. So that's another principle that stood out for me. And then the last is that children can use support and facilitation of expressed interests from their parents without parents convincing ourselves that children need to necessarily be taught anything, or that unschooling is something that we do that involves teaching anything. Another common question that I hear often is, how do I unschool? Or I unschool math, or I unschool this and I unschool that. And it's like, unschooling is not about an action as much as it's about a lifestyle, as much as it's about having trains of thought about how you're holding space for your children to grow, evolve, discover what works for them and what doesn't, embrace that that can change and that's okay. And also critical thinking, encouraging critical thinking skills, and allowing them to be able to embrace and dig into their critical thinking skills because they have options, because they have choices, versus being told, you need to do this, you need to do that. I think you need to do this, you need to do that. What I've been learning as an adult is the more I get in tune with my intuition and understand what it is that's going to work for me in any given moment, the better decisions I'm able to make in general, because they wind up matching up with what's really working for me. In order to give children an opportunity to learn how to do that from birth, and then they don't have to wait until they're an adult to learn that and learn that looking outside of themselves is for any answer and anything in particular should not be our first thing that we do. And when we're in tune with our intuition, we learn to look within first and figure out how are we feeling about a certain topic or a certain activity or what have you. Um, so yeah, that is my definition of unschooling and how it has worked out for us and how it's evolved thus far as we are now getting ready to transition into the newest part of our lives, as our youngest is now unschooled and off to college in August. And another thing that has also really stood out to me about unschooling that I've loved is that there is no such thing as one right way. It's just all about embracing that each of us get to do this how we want. Even when I look at both of my children, my oldest daughter, she made it clear pretty early on that she wasn't interested in doing college, and I embraced that. And she's gone off and she's living her life and she's figuring out her life. And my youngest daughter, she made it pretty obvious pretty early on that she thought she would do college. And due to her having the space to be able to make her mind up about it as she's tapped into her intuition, she made this happen. Going to college, getting her transcripts, going to her internships, getting them, all of the above. A lot of people ask, well, it seems a lot of people sometimes are scared that homeschooling, even, and definitely unschooling, can be this big, wide, unknown world of, oh my gosh, but how are they going to succeed? Or is it going to get in the way of them doing anything they want? And my answer to that is if public schooling and regular schooling doesn't get in the way with all of its imperfections of us accomplishing whatever we put our minds to, then nothing else can either. Because essentially, these children have the opportunity to define for themselves what success looks like for them. They don't need me to define that. They get to define that for themselves, just like I get to define that for myself. So anything that we put our minds to, we can accomplish no matter what it is. And no matter how we're schooled or unschooled or anything, we just figure it out. Yeah. So
Can you give folks the details on how to learn more about you and to get in touch with you if they wish?
yes, definitely. So I am Yvonne with Forever Unschooled. And for more info on all of my and my daughter's endeavors, you all can visit foreverunschooled.com. That's FOREVERUNSCHOOLED.com. And on Facebook, we're Forever Unschooled. We have a Facebook page, and on Instagram and YouTube, we are Forever Unschooled. So, yes. And also, if you want to learn more about all of our endeavors, because as my girls started out pretty quickly, once we did start unschooling, able to get into being authors, international authors, and illustrators and so much more, and business owners in general. They still are, all these years later, with so many other different types of businesses, as well as myself. And you can find out about all of our business endeavors at abundanceisourbirthright.com. And that's ABUNDANCEISOURRITE.com. Abundanceisourbirthright.com. That's where we are.
Perfect. That's perfect. And it's a wrap.